Yo, what's going on everyone? Konospens here, bringing you all a brand new Genshin Impact video, and today we're going to be talking about the best weapons in a tier list format for my Schneznaim boy, Childe. In preparation for this tier list, I used the Genshin Impact calculator for damage, for Childe, for a lot of weapons, all the 4-stars and 5-star weapons that I had access to. I was able to create this little spreadsheet, which is pretty nice. I'll link that down below in the description. And using the data I collected, as well as my professional 1.2 thousand subscriber YouTube opinion, I will be sorting them in this tier list, which you are more than welcome to agree with or disagree with. Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to smash like. And with that said, let's get into the tier list. So as always, we have to start with the Fodder Tier. So I'm going to do a little skip and you will see everything that goes into the Fodder Tier. And there it is. Fodder Tier is complete. It's essentially just all the 3-star weapons. There's not really a good reason to use a 3-star weapon in this case, unless you're just starting out in the game. Then you could just read the tier list top to bottom, left to right, and choose whatever you have the highest. Since we got the literal shit out of the way, why don't we get started with the actual usable bows inside of Genshin. Before I start sorting out these weapons, I just want to mention that all the damage numbers that I did calculate are calculated assuming the R1 version of the weapon, also those weapons being level 90, a level 90 Childe with level 10 talents, with HP, attack percent, hydro damage bonus, and crit rate as the main stats on the artifacts, all for the 4-piece Heart of Depth set, all at level 20. However, no substats, because that is very random and I wanted to remove as much random error as possible, because that's the science thing to do. Starting us off, we got the Alley Hunter. Alley Hunter isn't actually in the game yet. It has changed quite a bit. The first time I saw it, it did have crit rate as a substat and a 41 base attack. However, now it's changed to a 44 base attack and has attack percent as a substat. So it is up in the air, but I'm going to be going off of what it is right now. So the main stat and the substat, pretty solid like I just said. The passive increases your damage when you're off the field, and that buff only lasts for 4 seconds when you actually switch onto the field. And then after those 4 seconds, that buff falls off continuously until it's not there anymore, which is kind of weird, since yes, you want to switch on and off with Childe, but you don't want to put them on for 4 seconds. So that's a little counterintuitive, you know. Overall, the weapon has great damage, even though I wasn't able to calculate it in the calculator. The passive, however, makes it a little inconsistent, but I don't think it hurts it as bad. It just limits its potential. I think overall it is an A tier weapon, just because attack and attack percent is just really solid on Childe. Next up is the good ol' Amos Bow. You already know this bow because it was like all the talk when Ganyu was out. Has super high base attack, very solid attack percent substat, which Childe obviously scales off of very well. Not sure if the passive increases any of his melee damage. I don't think so from what I saw. It has the highest damage potential out of all the weapons though, when I was doing the calculations, just by like a couple hundred. There's another weapon that's very solid as well. I'm sure you can guess what it is. However, because this weapon is just really attack orientated, it can be really hard to build around this weapon for your artifacts, because that means you got to get your crit rate and your crit damage in your artifacts, and you already know how artifact rolls go. Pretty goddamn bad. And those rolls will really dictate whether you can draw out the maximum potential from this weapon. But overall, this weapon just has such a huge raw attack that I don't know where else to put it but in double S. Like, if you are able to pull off those really good rolls, then you're set. This will be such a god tier weapon. It's not even funny. However, that is only by a couple hundred damage. Next up is the good old Star Glitter weapon, which is literally renowned for like really good weapons for DPS characters, and that's just the Blackcliff series. Blackcliff Warbow, to be exact this time, has a great base attack and the ever so useful crit damage substat, allowing you to go for a crit rate circlet if you are unable to get your crit in your substats. The passive will only be up once you start killing enemies in a 30-second time period for a max of 3 stacks. So 3 enemies for max stacks within 30 seconds. Shouldn't be too hard if you're against a bunch of hilly trolls or slimes, but once you start getting against tankier enemies or even bosses, this passive is quite useless. Without the stacks, the damage is slightly above average from what I saw, and when all the stacks are active, it actually easily contends for a double S tier spot in terms of its damage. But you do have to remember that this passive is somewhat inconsistent, as I already mentioned. And because of that inconsistency, I don't want to put it in double S because it really relies on those stacks to compete with the Amos Bow and another double S tier weapon, which is why we're just going to keep it as a very solid S tier weapon. Our first craftable weapon, and that is going to be the Compound Bow. For Childe, not so much. It has a weak base attack, and Childe likes his high base attack. Pretty useless physical damage substat, if I do say so myself. You know, you want your Schneznayim boy all doing that hydro melee damage. That physical damage means nothing to him. The passive is pretty solid though, as it actually works on him, and you will gain and maintain max stacks within 2 seconds or less of him being in his melee form, which is pretty solid. The damage output is alright, only when you do have those max stacks. So overall, that low base attack and the useless substat is really hurting this weapon. And because of that, its damage was pretty underwhelming. And because of that underwhelming damage, we are going to have to put the Compound Bow in C tier. I think that's a good spot for it. Now, the newly released 5-star whale weapon, that's going to be the Elegy for the End. Very high base attack on par with the Amos Bow, but it does have that sucky wucky energy recharge substat, which Childe really doesn't even need that much. The passive on this thing, it's literally a paragraph, but essentially, flat out increases your elemental mastery by 60, which is pretty good if you're doing those vapes. But the whole Sigil of Remembrance thing, I don't really think that works on Childe, since his elemental skill is considered to be that whole initial stance change. So no, I don't believe the passive will work on Childe, meaning he won't get that attack percent boost and the even more elemental mastery. But I do want to point out that it could work. It's not in the damage calculator, so I can't confirm anything, but it may work if the Riptide effect is considered elemental skill damage, because on the Stringless, the Riptide effect damage is increased and Stringless increases elemental skill damage. So that's considered elemental skill damage, then yes, this passive will work on him. However, I am not a Giga Whale, so I haven't whaled for Elegy for the End, because I don't really have use for it. Damn, I really don't like not knowing if that works on it. If one of you have Elegy for the End and a Childe, please let me know. If it doesn't have the passive completely active, I want to put it in B tier. However, if it does have the passive active, I could easily see it being a solid A or a S tier weapon, but since I'm not sure, I'm gonna err on the side of caution. I'm gonna knock this thing into B tier. Don't hate me. I don't know exactly if the passive works, just because I don't own the weapon and I was not able to find anything useful on the internet for it. Oh, it's our beloved free-to-play weapon after beating Storm Terror, and that's gonna be the Favonius Warbow. Low base attack and energy recharge as a substat. It is the epitome of a support weapon. Passive just gives you even more energy. Like I said, support weapon. Truly the worst possible 4-star weapon for Childe, and can easily be placed in the D tier. Not quite fodder, since it can be useful on other characters and you don't really want to make it fodder, but that's the only thing making an escape D tier. The best free-to-play weapon for Childe, Prototype Crescent, has alright base attack, but we can forgive that for its massive attack percent substat. But the passive actually makes this weapon like super viable. As long as you do your rotation right, all you have to do is switch into Childe, do a charge shot on a enemy weak point, considering that enemy does have a weak point, and then your damage just skyrockets, trust me. Without the passive, the damage is all right. Like, it's nothing insane, it's just above average. But when it does have the passive up, if you do that charge attack and hit a weak point, oh my god, it does the most elemental burst damage out of all the weapons at refinement rank 1, and the third highest melee skill average damage. So it is double S when it has that passive up, but when we balance it out with when it doesn't have its passive up, because not every enemy has a weak point, and maybe sometimes you might forget to do a charge attack or something when you're in bow stance, we are gonna knock this into A tier. It is a very strong A tier, especially since it's a craftable weapon, and if the weekly bosses are nice enough to you, you can refine it and it just becomes that much more powerful. Okay, another star glitter weapon, Royal Bow. Alright base attack and a great attack percent substat. The passive, like always, I say this about the royal weapons all the time in every tier list, it's weird. And to be honest, it's kind of shit, since it's like a conditional crit that keeps resetting when you hit a crit. But hey, it could work for Childe since he does have a pretty fast attack speed. It has above average damage, but is outperformed by a weapon of equal cost, that being, you know, the Blackcliff Warbow. So use your star glitter on the Blackcliff Warbow, not this. And overall, I think this is just a top tier, B tier weapon. All right, we got a juicy one. That's gonna be Rust. Not the game Rust, but the bow Rust. All right, base attack, that's fine, because the attack percent substat is huge. It's just huge. The passive literally just gives you a massive boost to your normal attack damage, which does work on your melee attacks, which is pretty awesome. I think at refinement 1, it's 40%. If you get it refinement 5, you're doing 80% more damage, which is insane. Very, very solid damage overall, just short of double S tier damage, but this weapon is consistent. It will always do that just below double S tier damage, and if you get refinements, oh god, the thing is just a monster. And because of its great damage output and how consistent it is, I can confidently say that it's the top of S tier, no doubt. So another support weapon, that's going to be the Sacrificial Bow. Has a very nice base attack, I will not lie about that, but it's got that doo-doo energy recharge as a substat. Not useful, we don't need it, get it out of here. The passive is useless too, because it just doesn't work with Childe's E skill. Literally a dud of a weapon besides its high base attack. Like, it would be on par with Favonius Warbow, but because it does have that higher base attack, it gets to go at the bottom of C tier, just escaping the D tier. Alright, Skyward Harp. I might be a bit biased here because this is the weapon that I use. Highest possible base attack in all of Genshin Impact, and a crit rate substat which caps at 22.1% at level 90, which is very good for ease of building. Now the passive, let me introduce you to this. At refinement rank 1, it gives you another valuable stat, that being some crit damage. I believe it's 20% at refinement rank 1, and you also get these little mini physical attacks, which is just some extra DPS, so that's just like a nice little white cherry on top, if you know what I mean. Overall, just very solid weapon, makes it super easy to build Childe. It is a couple hundred damage short on DPS compared to the Amos Bow, but because of that ease of building, I do believe it is better than the Amos Bow, just because of that ease of building, and you can surely make up for that couple hundred damage, if not more, through some substats, because I'm gonna remind you, I did all these tests without substats. Alright, we got the Stringless. It has a okay base attack. It does have Mastery as a substat, which only comes into play when proccing elemental reactions, which is great for having some giant vaporized numbers. However, in the damage calculations, I did not do any reactions because that gets very complicated. The passive works and will increase Riptide damage and initial stance change damage, but not the actual melee attacks, and it will also increase the damage of both versions of your elemental burst. This one's kinda tough to place. With the reactions, I see this weapon being really solid, but without the reactions, because he's constantly attacking super fast and applying Hydro all the time, I don't think you have much room for reactions other than when you first swap them in, so I think a balanced place to put this weapon would be in the B tier. Battle Pass weapon, we got the Viridescent Hunt. Alright base attack with a solid crit rate substat maxed at 27.6%. The passive does not work in melee stance, so you will not get those bonus little hits for some extra DPS. Overall, the attack is pretty average, nothing spectacular. But just because you can get this weapon from the battle pass, I don't recommend refining it because the passive will do nothing. But just because of the ease of building that you can get from this weapon and that you can focus your artifacts into a bunch of different stats, I think I'm gonna put in, it'll be in the middle of A tier. I think it's a solid A tier weapon. Lastly, the Windblume Festival weapon, the Windblume Ode. It has some alright base attack and the same mastery substat as the Stringless. However, the passive this time, I honestly like this one a bit more. Not so much design, but I do like the passive more. It increases attack percent by 16% at R1, but since this is an event weapon, you should be getting this thing to Refinement 5, and at Refinement 5, that attack percent buff goes to 32%. To be exact, you only got 6 seconds to capitalize on that huge attack percent bonus from your passive, and to get all that mastery damage as well, which may be a deal breaker for you. It just requires you to play your Childe less, which, in my opinion, I don't want to play Childe any less than I already have to. And because I know that the playstyle for this weapon won't be for everyone, I'm going to put it in B tier with the Stringless since they're very similar. But because I think that attack percent boost is a little more beneficial, especially since this weapon is going to be Refinement 5 if you actually play the festival, I am going to bump it above the Stringless. And yeah, there we go. There's the tier list. If you agree, let me know. If you disagree, give me your input. I will read your comment, don't worry. I read them all. I'm watching you. Also, drop a like on the video and I will catch you all in the next one.